Can you tell I just put this up right before we started this? If you can, then great. The final season of Jessica Jones is now officially on Netflix and thereby concluding the Marvel Netflix saga. Now, this part of the MCU doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it will some other day when Hulu eventually does something with it. I think it will. This particular season takes place right after the ending of Jessica Jones season 2, where, spoiler alert if you've not seen it, Trish killed Jessica's mom, and they're trying to live in this very transitional period where they're not speaking to each other anymore. Trish's experiment that went horribly wrong did result in some powers coming to her, and Jessica is coming to terms with the fact that she's being treated more and more as a hero by certain people. And all of this starts to come to a bit of a head when a serial killer of sorts seems to show up at Jessica's doorstep and attempts to kill her. And she starts going after this man, whose name is apparently Salinger, who has some strange motives and some very twisted ones. I thought the first season of Jessica Jones is one of the strongest Marvel Netflix ever had. I really loved that season, and a lot of it was because of David Tennant as Kilgrave. The second season of Jessica Jones I also really liked, not as much as the first season, but in hindsight that has gone down slightly for me because I didn't think it had as much of a staying power as much as the first season had. I also think that it wasn't as strong as that first season. So naturally, I was excited for season 3 because this is essentially a major wrap-up. This is not just a wrap up for Jessica Jones, but it's essentially wrapping up all of Marvel television. So I guess the stakes surrounding it are a lot more in terms of perceptions, if that is the case to be taken here. And I thought this season, for a capstone season of this entire thing, pretty solid. I thought this was a really entertaining season. I think it is better than season 2, which is funny because the rating I gave season 2 was extremely high, and I think that it'll go down a little bit. But I do think that this is more tightly written than season 2. One of my issues with season 2, in fact my biggest issue with season 2, is that it meandered quite a bit. It would be focusing on very different things from time to time, and some of those things were very inconsequential eventually in the long run of that season storyline. Here they keep it focused. Here it's very laser focused on the fact that Jessica is after this serial killer. And they try to do everything in their power to connect everything that's happening towards this one storyline. Does it all work? No. There are points where subplots are brought up. There are different aspects of those plots that don't really go anywhere, or they don't go into the places that I was expecting them to. There's a couple of subplots in particular that I felt like were just there for the sake of being there. Krysten Ritter, once again, I have to say, and for the final time here, has done a spectacular job. I thought she was fantastic casting at first anyway, so seeing her really just become this character with every season and everything she's been in is quite remarkable. I'm gonna really miss her take on Jessica Jones. I think she really brought a lot of personality to this character, this very broken character, and she did a fantastic job with it. Rachel Taylor as Trish. In the first season, I liked her. In the second season, most people hated her. And I think that's kind of what they were going for, because they've sort of accepted that going into season 3. Over here, they tried to do something very different with her, and I think that her character arc was really great. They actually managed to do a lot with her now that she was free of the reins of sorts, and I think she did a really, really great job. I think everyone here actually did a great job, and I think one of the standouts, however, more so in this season than any other thing before, was Carrie-Anne Moss as Hogarth. I think she really got a chance to shine here. This is some of the best acting she has ever done, and she's giving it 300%. She's doing such a great job here, even if the material for her isn't always top notch. One major improvement in this season compared to the other seasons is the action sequences. I think they're really great. Some of them are more visceral than others. There's definitely better choreography. It's more brutal. There's a few more moments which are definitely more, intense in comparison to the other seasons, because Trish has these powers and she's slowly on her way to becoming this thing called Hellcat, which is in the comics. Her transition and the way she's developing those skills, the fights that she's in, are very brutal and they're very unflinching at points. And I think they really nail that aspect. This time they actually got some really good stuff. You get some great stunts, some very nice in-camera stuff with Jessica as well, along with Salinger and other characters. I thought they did a really good job with that. Once again, I really like the whole vibe of the PI thing. her narrating and all that. It really feels like a detective murder mystery show through and through, and the music also really helps with that. Once again, it's just a really spectacular soundtrack, and I think in those respects, the show does a fantastic job. But those are things I mentioned about the other seasons too. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of improvements in terms of the writing and in terms of the action sequences. Let's talk about Salinger for a moment. He's an intimidating villain. He's got some creepy moments to him, some very unsettling moments. But I found him to be slightly mixed because I think parts of him were sort of going through the motions. You established a certain character for him at one point, and then after a certain while, it feels like they're going back to the same thing over and over again, instead of adding something new to it. Now, granted, they did a very similar thing in a way with Kilgrave, but in Kilgrave's case, there was always something new added to Kilgrave that would change things up a little bit. So there would be a different way to approach him as a character. Here, on the other hand, it feels like we're going back to the same thing over and over again. And after a while, I didn't know about him as much as I wanted to know. I mean, I knew enough. I guess that's what they were going for, but I never had a chance to really, you know, to really, I don't want to say root for this guy or sympathize with the guy, because none of those things. He's a serial killer. This leads me into my negatives though, because I do have some issues with this season, and one of my biggest things is, aside from some of Salinger's stuff, is some subplots. Now, like I said, most of everything that happens in this season adds up to something. But there are a couple of things that don't really add up to much. In particular, this one character, I'm just gonna say his name, Malcolm. Malcolm's storyline in this, for the first third of the season, I'm on board with, and even the show is going down that path. Then the second and third segments of the show come in, and there is still a point to it, but it doesn't feel as important to the rest of the story. It almost feels like a drag. And I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. They could have had it connect more to the story, but it sort of feels like a character motivation thing for him, which is fine, but I also want to have that connect to things a little bit more than they kind of end up doing. They just sort of end up being things that are happening on the side that also are a part of the story, but they're not in the main core of the story after a certain while, so it just feels like a side quest that's there. There's also a similar plot line with another character which has some ramifications for the first third of it, and then after that it just gets increasingly stretched to the point where it's like, alright, we got it. And those can be a few frustrating little notes. Not to say that the whole season is like that or that persists throughout. It's just, I think that they could have taken a little more time, maybe connecting a few things a little bit more. So yeah, that was definitely problematic. Also, in terms of themes, there are points where it hits certain notes that we have seen before. The idea of Jessica going through trauma and PTSD. These themes have been tackled before, but they sort of go for it again, and that's fine, but I wanted something a little different this time. A different way of looking at it, a different way of approaching it. Have her see her mom or something. I know that's cliched, I guess, but it's not been done here before, so maybe it could have been interesting to see that happen. Just food for thought. I'm not really sure who to blame for this. Should I blame the writers or should I blame Netflix in terms of the cancellation? But there are certain things that do feel a little unresolved still. There's a few plot lines that just kind of stop, and then maybe down the line we'll see a little more to it if we ever get a season 4, but as of right now, if this is where it's ending, there are a few things that are left open, and I wish they could have completed that up a little bit more. But again, I don't know who to blame for that, and I don't know exactly whether to critique that or not. So I'm just gonna leave that as a pass point, just as a personal observation. But the rest of it works out really well. It has a great ending. It finally wraps up really, really well. And like I said, I think for the most part, this season did a great job. I had a lot of fun watching it. The first few episodes were decent. Once episode 5 kicked in, it really just slammed into gear. I binge watched pretty much the entire thing in one sitting after that. There's a character in this, by the way, quick mention. There's a character in this named Eric who comes in. I really liked him. Yeah, it was great. You know, he was really great. He had a nice back and forth with the characters, which I did appreciate. Um, so yeah, that was definitely a nice add-in. Overall, like I said, I will miss this series. I will miss this universe of Marvel. And down the line, I do hope we get something more with them. But this is a nice send-off. It's not perfect. It's not as good as it could have been, but it's solid. It's solid, and I'll take that honestly. I'm gonna give the final season of Jessica Jones a B plus. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Look forward to more videos very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.